the SI joint, and I'm going to go over those approaches. Ben, if you could put those slides up. We'll talk about the approaches, then followed by demonstrations of each of the approaches. So when we talk about approaches, we think, how many approaches are there? You can name one, name two, name three, but there's actually seven. There's seven approaches. And this is a time-honored tradition. This goes all the way back to even before Smith-Peterson. I'll show you one that even happened before that. This goes back to the time where they called this the os innominatum bone, or the innominate bone. That's a kind of an anachronistic term. Even before Neil and I started practicing, we call it the ilium. So thank God. So the first, from Smith-Peterson all the way down to Gainsland, you had this approach laterally. So that's a familiar approach to us, but this was done open with the flap of the gluteal muscles taken back and portions of the ilium put forth for the lateral approach. You kind of fast forward up in the way the early 2000s, Bukowski and Giannakis took parts of the ilium here and shoved it in laterally. This is a plate and lateral screw fixation device. We go into the anterior column, and this is all done open, obviously. There's no other way to get to the anterior column. So this is done by virtue of bone, Randegunner, and a plate anteriorly, and there's still some of these around. These were done back in the 80s, mid-80s to late 90s. This is something that should be familiar to you guys. Kirana and then Mark Riley did this. This is the SI bone triangular titanium implants, and this is a single screw placed laterally, so that's more familiar to us today. Weisbrod Mitchell took a portion of the bone, and then they packed it in here and put a sealing over the back of it, including this is done by Wise and Bruce Dahl that put this into the anterior portion. This is the articular portion. This is in the extra-articular recess back here. And then you can secure that. Keating Belanger took a portion of the bone, used a combination of lateral screws, and then this is a posterior screw and plate fixing this extra-articular fusion in place. And then John Stark used the Nadia screw followed by the daughter screw, and this is two versions of this BAS that's put in right here in the extra-articular recess, and thus this is done. I'll show you an example of this along the motion and the weight-bearing surface of the SI joint all the way down pointed toward the femoral head. And so all of these, we've known a few things. We'd heard me talk about operative parameters and outcomes. So not only the minimally invasive approaches that I'm about ready to discuss, not only are they better in terms of operative parameters, blood loss, op time, patient recovery, days in hospital, they're also better in terms of pain, function, quality of life. So they're not only better, they're all the way around better. And we'll talk about some of the posterior approaches. There's a difference between posterior extra-articular and then the posterior inferior approach, which gets at the hyaline cartilage portion of the joint. So we talk about posterior implants, posterior allograft implants. This is all the rage starting in about 2012. Does anybody know the first posterior implant ever done? It's done by C.F. Painter in 1908. So this is not a new approach by any stretch of the imagination. And I was able to look this original article up, and this is from the original article. Kept the guy in the hospital for 33 days. Times have changed, right? We keep him 33 minutes before we kick him out. And so this is done, and it took a long time to recover, and this is taking the posterior portion of the iliac bone, decorticating the joint in the extra-articular recess, packing it in there, and keeping him non-weight-bearing for 33 days. Wow, talk about punitive measures. And so the posterior extra-articular approach, I told you I'd show this. This is from a case using the Nadia screw. And there's two versions of this that look very similar. This is the Nadia screw that is placed into the extra-articular recess, packed with bone graft, and is pointed directly toward the femoral head. This is done to the weight-bearing portions of the SI joint. Weight comes down the spine, out the SI joints, around, down the hips, kind of part of the weight bearing, also goes to the superior and inferior pubic rami, and this is designed to carry weight. And this is usually packed with bone graft and used with bone morphogenic protein. So this is bone graft plus a little bit of fertilizer to speed up the healing. And this is what it looks like. So you get the idea, the distraction arthrodesis, this joint is wider than that. And the extra-articular portion is kind of conical, funnel-shaped, and you put this in, packed with bone graft. And this is a distraction arthrodesis that heals pretty darn well when it heals. There's some issues with this, but typically not. This is done by Fuchs and Rule, and these are big hollow cannulated screws. The most conspicuous type of screw that's recognizable to me is a Zimmer screw, and I'll show you an example of that in a second. But this is a distraction arthrodesis down the joint, and you see how well this fuses. So all of these can tend to work very well. So the posterior inferior approach, this is typically the place that we put the cortical allografts. This is more of a modern day approach. Usually you use 1 or 2 cortical allografts. And the whole principle behind this is very safe. Neurovascular bundle, the lumbosacral trunk, and farther down the lumbosacral plexus, vascular portion of this. And you can see if you put a placement down here and you go too far, you could go all the way through the iliacus muscle, is what this is. And there's really nothing out there. So this is incredibly safe. Just don't go too medial. This is the neural structures. And if you follow the joint, there's no reason to get over here too medial. So let's show you an example of this posterior approach. So on the ATP view, draw a line across the top part of the sacral foramina. Here's the contralateral oblique looking down the joint itself. You're standing AP, you're looking down the contralateral, because my SI joints as I stand here are going like this. So you're on the table, contralateral oblique looks down the joint. Here you point it toward really the apex here. You can point it 2 directions, right when the superior portion of the alar line crosses the anterior portion of the sacrum, or I like to point it at the prominence between the anterior wall and the superior wall. This is the most anterior portion of it. Then you start to get into the hyaline portion of the joint, which is kind of has a boomerang shaped here. So that's typically where we'll point this. We'll put the pen down, followed by the joint finder and the working channel. You can see the working channel in the joint. It's very easily seen. And then the implant is placed through that. And here's what a this is what a cortical allograft looks like right here in the center of the joint. This is newly placed. This is a CT taken about 12 weeks later. You can see the incorporation of the cortical allograft into the sacrum and the ilium. And this is an example of a modern cortical allograft implant. So let's take a look at a posterolateral approach, which we'll also demonstrate. Same thing. I'll show you how you create the lines. Take it across the top of the sacral foramina, the S1 foramen. We see here, we take a contralateral oblique, we draw a line here, and we start at the combination just right above that in this quadrant. So this is started, and we angle this according to the S1 superior end plate, and the angle can be anywhere from this degree of obliquity all the way out to here. The only thing you don't want to violate, you don't want to violate the anterior wall, and this is kind of off a little bit. To get a sharp pelvic inlet view, you'll keep coming toward the feet, looking up, the eye is toward the patient's feet. So this is appropriate, just don't want to violate the anterior wall. This angle is also appropriate. And so here's what it looks like with an S1 and S2 screw posterolateral or posterior oblique approach. Here's what it looks like. Here's a case where I put this kind of in addition to a long segment construct. The advantage here is it spares the gluteal muscles. So you don't have to come to the gluteal muscles, which attach to the PSIS right here. This is done about 1.5 centimeters anterolateral to the PSIS. And there's a good example of a screw that goes all the way down, does not violate the anterior margin, and we can see the lumbosacral trunk right there, a long segment construct. So lateral approach is a little bit different variation of this. So here's an example of a lateral approach that does go through the gluteal muscles, but it does so with dilation of the gluteal muscles. So you start off with the Jamshidi, you can start off with the cannulated bevel tip or a diamond tip. You can start off with a blunt tip. You hammer it into the S1 bony corridor, one into the S2 bony corridor, and then one in between. So here's the trajectory that goes through the muscles with a dilation component. So here's your entry point. Here's the bony corridor. Here's the vestigial disc. Here's the superior border of the sacral ala, the ventral part of the sacral ala. It's also SI joint, of course, because it goes all the way out to the anterior border of the ala. So this is your anterior portion. So the center of S1, the center of S2 are the typical start points for a lateral approach. The vestigial disc, which is right here, what does that mark? The S1 neural foramen. The vestigial disc of S2, what does that mark? The S2 neural foramen. And what's in the neural foramina? Nerve roots. So mental note, stay away from that. So here we start off, this is the bony corridor of S1, the bony corridor of S2. And here's what it looks like. This is the lateral view. This is the pelvic outlet view, and it splays apart. And with a person laying down in front of me here, their lumbar spine will be like this. Their sacrum will be dorsally tilted. This is superior for the lumbar spine. This is superior to the sacrum. So you have to make sure and get your orientation. The sacrum is not the lumbar spine. It has a completely different 60-degree flip on it. So this is something you have to keep in mind when doing SI joint fusion. So things to stay away from the neural foramina. Do not go into the sciatic notch. That's way far away. You can use this to line up your lateral view. Lining up the greater sciatic notch is very good for getting a true lateral. And then you kind of start out, hammer it in, S1 trajectory, S2 trajectory, put the pin in, put dilator 1, dilator 2. Dilator 1, you size the screw, you put the screw in through dilator 2 through the working channel. The screw goes through the working channel. We put a screw in here. Typically, this is 50 to 60 millimeters in length. This is 40 to 50. Usually this is 60 for me. This is 50. And here's right in the center of S1. This is right in the center of S2. We see the vestigial disc right here. This whole swath of territory is open season for S1 fusion. This is S2. Vestigial disc, this whole thing is S2. And you can take something and go through, provided the person has conventional anatomy, there's nothing in the way. So you're not getting back into the canal, you're not getting ventral into the lumbosacral trunk and plexus, you're not getting into the vestigial disc, S1 and S2 nerve roots. So you can theoretically take this and go all the way through the other side, through the ilium, through the gluteal muscles, out the skin and not hurt somebody. So just realize that these are bony corridors. These are safety corridors. So mention the size of the screws. You can use a screw alignment to set in place the second screw. This is what this is. The S2 screw can be placed through this. I typically don't use this because you have to enlarge the size of the incision. I like to keep it small, about 10 to 12 millimeters, but you can if you want to, and this is a very good way to align it, but I prefer to keep the incision small and just freehand this. And then a third screw, there's articles, many SI joint biomechanical articles. The sum of this says definitely 2, probably 3 is the right number of fusion implants that you need to make sure a joint is stable. So, I kind of err toward the orthopedic principles. There's nothing like 3 points of fixation to make sure your joint is stable. So you can have a third screw that comes between the first and second screw right at see this is the neural foramen right here, then this is a short screw. The only thing you have to make sure is don't put it into the foramen. If you put this into the foramen, we can't be friends anymore because it's easier to see. It's right there. Just don't do that. Don't go here. And just put it short right there. The other place that you can put it is to put another screw up in S1. That's a very viable thing. You can also do a hybrid approach. These are the old Zimmer screws. They're hollow screws. These are old cervical plates that we have to use. So see how far we've come. We don't have to use old things that are made for something else, except these were made for SI joint fusion, but cervical plates obviously were not. But this is the old hybrid approach, and we can now use modern tools for the hybrid approach. You can even use this modern tools for a salvage. This is something I've seen a few times. I want to burn it into your brain and let you know because you should remember what I'm about to say. This fusion looks fine to me, and this is not a fusion that I did, although I don't mind these. This is the SI bone triangular titanium implants, the modern portion of these. I've placed quite a few of these. But to me, let's just say there was no evidence of toggling, no haloing, no evidence of loosening. This looked fine. And this is, she was a 42-year-old female, but her 6 out of 6 physical examination and test findings positive. 100% pain relief with injection. The bottom line is it looks fused, wasn't, or it looks stable, isn't. And so we did cortical allograft salvage and placing cortical allograft in the real anterior portion, the hyaline portion, the cartilage portion of this. We can see it down the barrel here, down the working channel, and it's right in here to have a good salvage with just a small incision and a small salvage that didn't require much in terms of patient recovery and then patient pain and continued suffering. She did extremely well on follow-up, and I saw her 6 weeks out, 2 weeks out, 6 weeks out. I haven't seen her since. She's doing great still. So out of all approaches, there are 3 modern approaches. The goal of this is to establish the safety and efficacy of the MIS, or maybe MMIS, more minimally invasive surgery of the SI joint fusion. So 3 of them are common. The other 4 we don't really use. Each have their own advantages and disadvantages. All of them are more advantageous than the open approaches. All of these techniques are straightforward, can be done with fairly easy fluoroscopic rules, and they can be done in combination for a hybrid approach, and you will need this at some point in time for additional stabilization of the SI joint. And for those of you who don't currently do it, this is one of the most gratifying things we do. I have somebody in my office that suffers from chronic pelvic instability. She also is a research assistant who collected data for these trials, and she said, there's no way I'm going to have one of these done. And after collecting about 8 people in the Stacy trials, she said, maybe I want to have this done, because regardless of what it looks like, it's actually pretty easy to do and to have done, and the outcomes are absolutely fantastic. ODI ranges from about 23 to 28, and the VAS ranges about 40 to 50 in terms of improvement. So to translate, that's a home run over center field fence. It's one of the best things we do. Thank you guys very much.